Hello and welcome everyone. Till now in this tutorial series, we have discussed certain examples of Django routing where we utilize hard-coded URL pattern. However, in this tutorial, we will understand an essential feature of Django which provides its developers to extract one or more values from the specific URL while making an HTTP request. So in this tutorial, we will discuss about dynamic URLs in Django. And we will start off this video by understanding what are hard-coded URLs, and we have already discussed and implemented few examples related to them in the previous tutorial, and then we will discuss what are dynamic URLs and how we can define them in Django. So without any further delay, let's jump to the very first topic. Now consider this example where we want to build a website with 100 web pages. Now to serve all those 100 web pages, we do not necessarily need hundreds of routes. Instead, we need the ability to collect URL variables so that one route pattern may handle a variety of pages. Now, before we move forward and discuss about the dynamic URLs, we need to have some understanding related to hard-coded URLs. And if you are following our tutorial thoroughly, you may know that we have already implemented hard-coded URL in the previous example. So here you can see I have opened my VS Code. Now in this, if I show you the URLs file for the project, here you can see I have defined this hard-coded URL which is index. So whenever I move to the URL index, it will redirect to the all the URLs which are defined in the home application. And if I open the home application URL, for an empty string, it will return the index view which we have created in the previous tutorial. If I show you once again what is index view, here you can see the index view. Now let me open the terminal. Let me quickly activate the virtual environment and then I will run the application. To run the development server, we write this command python manage.py run server, and I have to move to this URL which is coming up in the terminal. Now we have hard coded defined this URL index. So if I put index and then hit enter, here we got our result. So this result is coming from the index view that we have defined in our urls.py file. Now let's understand about dynamic URLs. So a URL is an address which whose full form is this uniform resource locator. So URL of a web page whose content relies on varying input. So basically a URL stands for Uniform Resource Locator, and it is an address of a web page whose content relies on varying inputs made to the server delivering it. The parameter might have been pre-included in the URL or they could have been added by the user. Character or character strings that appears in the URL that indicates that it is a dynamic can be frequently identified. In Django, to define a dynamic URL, we need to utilize angle brackets. These angle brackets help us to capture value specified from the URL pattern. Now, how we can define a dynamic URL? Let's understand this thing with the help of an example. So I will move back to my VS Code editor, and here I will try to define a dynamic URL. For this, I will open the urls.py file which is there in my home application, and here let me define a URL. So I will type path, then single quotes. Now within the single quotes, if I want to define any dynamic URL, I will use angle brackets, and within the angle brackets we can define the name of our variable. So for example, I type the variable name as name, then we need to define the view for the corresponding URL. So I will define URL as get underscore name, and then we need to specify the name for our URL. So let me name it as get underscore name again. So with this we have defined our dynamic URL. Now here I have to put one forward slash as well. Now I can define any value to this name variable with the help of a URL, and whenever this URL has been entered, it will redirect to this get name view. So I also need to create one view for this. So what I will do, I will move to this views.py file. Let me comment out the previous index view. Let me create one new view with name get name. So I will type def get underscore name. Now you know the very first parameter for a view is request. So I will pass request, and then we need to pass the variable that we have captured. So I have captured name variable. Now then I will simply return an object of HTTP response. Let me print the name. Now if I want to print the name variable, I have to use curly brackets, and within that I have to specify the name of the variable which is name, and with this I have defined a view for my URL. So first as I have removed the index view, let me comment out this path as well for the index view. Now with this, I am ready with my dynamic URL. So I will open the web page. Now after index, I have to specify any name. So let me specify it as James. Hit enter, and here you can see the result. Hi, my name is James. Now James value is coming from this URL. If I specify any other name, for example, I specify Robin, then this value will automatically be changed. Now let's understand one more thing here. Whenever we define a dynamic URL, so whenever we try to fetch any value from the URL, the by default data type for the value will be string. So if I move back to my view, and before returning the HTTP response, let me print the type of the name variable. So let me refresh this. Let me move back to the terminal, and here you can see the data type for this name variable is string. Even though I try to specify any other value, for example, if I specify 1, see in that case I got the value 1 my page, and but the data type for the variable will remain string only. And in the same manner, if I put any float value as well, for example, I put 1.2, the Django server will consider this 1.2 as string only. Here you can see I am getting class string. So what we can do in such cases, we can also change the data type, or we can specify the data type of the value that we want from the URL. So let me change this example little bit. For example, instead of name, let me fetch ID. So I will type ID. Now if I want to specify this ID as an integer data type, I need to specify int colon ID. Oh, sorry, let me name this as user underscore ID, and then in the end I have to put one forward slash. So with this I have specified the data type for my captured value. So I define the data type as integer for this user underscore ID, and again the mapping will remain same. Whenever we move to this URL, it will go to the get underscore name view. Let's make some changes to this view as well. So instead of name, let me first make it as user underscore ID. Then let's check the data type for this user underscore ID. Now what we can do here, we can also implement certain logic based upon the value that we are fetching from the URL. And how we can do this, let me implement a very simple basic example. So for example, I use if statement to check whether the value of user ID is 1 or not. So if it is 1, let me define a string data, so which will print the name of the user. Let me type user name James. Let me put James as capital G. Let me put another condition. For another condition, I will use elif. Again, I will check whether the value of user underscore ID is 2, and if it is 2, I will make the variable as username Robin. Let me put one else as well, and in that case I will print invalid user ID, and instead of returning this thing I will return data. Let me make this as h2 so that we can see it properly. So with this we have defined this view which will accept only integer type value user underscore ID. Then we will check the data type for the user underscore ID. Then based upon the value, if the user ID is 1, then it will print the username as James. If the user ID is 2, then the username Robin will be printed out, and if any other integer value has been given, then it will print invalid user ID. And in the end I am returning this value of data as an HTTP response object. What I will do first, let's check the value for 1. So the URL is index/1 forward slash. Let's hit enter, and here you can see I got the result username James. If I change the value of 1 with 2, it will print the username as Robin. And again, if I change the value from 2 to 4, it will print invalid user ID. Now if I show you the data type for this user underscore ID, it will consider the user underscore ID as integer data type. So that's why you can see we got the class as int. So with this we have come to the end of this tutorial session, where we have discussed how we can create dynamic URLs in Django. Thank you so much for watching this video. We will see you in the next one.